In 2008, we came back and did three IUIs, and they all failed. So we took 2009 off to just travel and drink and pout. And then in 2010, we came back and did three more IUIs. Two failed and one was successful, and I carried her to 15 weeks before my water broke. So we did another stillbirth on that. And again, in the midst of everybody else in our family having babies, right? Everybody is like people at church who aren't on Facebook. Because at this time, I was really open with everything. Because I, again, didn't have the luxury of private grief. I didn't have first trimester miscarriages that everybody knew. And I just embraced that. I was like, you know what? This is my soapbox. There are enough people who don't talk about it for whatever reason. Either they don't get to, or it makes people uncomfortable, or they're not quite sure how to talk about it. This can be my soapbox.
Welcome to Authentic Conversations. I'm your host, Ryan James Miller, and I believe the way to freedom, fulfillment, and success ultimately comes by living as the most authentic version of yourself. If you're ready to live the life you've dreamed of, you're in the right place.
All right. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the podcast. I am here with Rachel Fox. Rachel and I were connected, as I am connected to so many people through LinkedIn. We share some common space in the healthcare, health insurance, employee benefits world is how we kind of collided. And through a conversation, I think actually through something I posted, Rachel had made a comment just talking about the fact that she had quite the journey, quite the story, had endured quite a lot herself. And as I read through a little bit of her bio, I could only imagine how much more powerful the rest of what she was about to say was. One of the things that she talks about, and I'm sure she's going to get into today, and this will resonate with probably a lot women than it will men, but I'm sure if you were on the other side of this, you would as well. But she's a mom to three. All three of those children, it sounds like, came by way of IVF, which is a journey in and of itself. All three were born premature, just another journey on top of that. And so there's a lot more to her, a lot more that we'll talk about today. But for now, Rachel, thank you for being on the podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm very excited. Thank you so much.
I should also let everybody know, I don't say this enough, but I do intentionally, or I allow guests intentionally to prepare as little as humanly possible. And Rachel said something to me right before this, right? You're like, you really didn't give me much to go off of here.
I'm inherently a winger though, so I feel like I'm okay with that. Like, it's fine.
And you're talking about yourself, right? I mean, when we talk about ourselves, it should be pretty easy to talk about ourselves. If we have to prepare too much, there's something scary about to happen there.
Yeah, don't ask me dates or anything because I'm old enough where I have to do the subtraction, carry the one and all. But overall, I kind of know what happened.
That's good. That's good. Okay. So, there is probably a lot to talk about. Obviously, in kind of the context of this podcast, this season of my podcast, one of the things that we've been talking about a lot is just this idea, a reality that in one way or another, every single one of us is inflicted with some sort of wound, multiple wounds. Sometimes those are self-inflicted. Other times those are others inflicted. And in your case, it was really just an outside circumstance that really affected you in a very serious way. So I would be interested to hear. So how old were you when you started making attempts? We don't have to get too much detail, but when you started making attempts to get pregnant?
Well, I got married when I was 26. Okay. And just from some previous health things that had happened in the past, they had always kind of said, it's going to be really hard for you to get pregnant. We're not sure if you'll be able to have kids. So we weren't like not trying. So I got married in 2003 and it didn't take long. And then I was pregnant all of a sudden. And I was like, wow, that was unexpected. That was sooner than expected. But we were happy about it. We were excited and we had just gotten our own place. And you know how it is starting out, like, you can just go and conquer everything and you're unstoppable. And this is fantastic. Everything was looking really good. And I made it to 19 weeks when my water broke. And like, that's not supposed to happen, right? You're supposed to have this magical, after you get past the magical number 13, everything's fine. Like, everything's fine after that, right? Like, don't tell anybody before 13. And after that, you can tell people because it's okay. So with us, that kind of blindsided us. Most of my other sister-in-laws were pregnant, and we had talked about like, oh, we'll all have cousins the same age and we can exchange maternity clothes and all the fun things. So as their due dates approached, I told my husband, I was like, I can't be here. Like, I can't be here. I'm not able to be happy for them. I'm not going to knit them some booties. I'm not going to bake them a casserole. Like, I'm not that person right now. We just need to go. And we just bought a one-way plane ticket to Rome. We just like headed out.
Wow.
And we were like, I don't know what we're going to do or how long we're going to be here. Luckily, I was a 1099 for Aflac. And so I could just kind of do that. And then he worked for the federal government, so he has lots of leave. So we could just meander as we needed to, because I needed to escape. And then, a couple weeks later, we wound up in Amsterdam and we were like, we need to go home. And we can't stay here. And so we went home, and then it was like, okay, now I'm on a mission, right? Because now I have to replace what was lost. Like, I had a plan. God's clearly not listening to that plan. It was a fabulous plan. I don't know what he's doing here, but he's clearly made a mistake. So I'm going to like get with the program and do everything I can. And for the next 2 years, we really did everything we could to try to get pregnant. I was taking my temperature every morning. I was doing Clomid. I had seen my OB. Like, we were doing all the things. And I'm surrounded by baby makers, right? In this family of baby makers, some popping them out 2 at a time. And it was like a huge rift in my family. I lost friendships over it because, again, of my inability to be happy for other people. I was so self-centered on that. I was so stricken with my grief and look at what's happening to me and how can you be going and having a happy life? Yeah. But then, after, I guess it was like 2007 at that point, I kind of just took a year off after those 2 years because everybody's like, oh, just stop trying. That's when it happens. And I was like, and in the meantime, everybody's super helpful, like giving me their Aunt Betty's cookie recipe because magical things happen with that. And why don't you take Geritol and do all of these things as if like I had some control over it.
So let me ask you right there. So because there's a lot that happened. I'm sure a lot that was experiencing. So some of the common things that I think come into play. So first of all, like, what did this do to your marriage? Because you are new, you get married, boom, you get pregnant, total surprise. It's like, oh my gosh, we're so amazing together. Look at the doctor said no, and we did it anyway. We weren't even really trying for it. That's taken away from you, and you escape to Europe. I'm sure that was both hard, but then also kind of like freeing in a sense. We're going to get away. We're going to do this. But then you have to come back to reality, and you have to start really working at something that we don't think we have to work a lot at. And so what did that do to your marriage, your relationship during that time?
Yeah, I think times like this lets you in really more deeply into who you married, right? And I think that it's really important to take people for who they are and see them for who they are and not expect them to become somebody else. So my husband is amazing at a lot of things. He's my best friend. He is the greatest mate for me. But he kind of has the emotional capacity of a wasp. Like, it's just one of those things where he was just like, are you better now? You done? You ready? Like, can we go out of the house? Yeah. Y'all ready? Y'all ready? And I was like, no, this is not something I need to sit in my grief and be angry for a long time. Stop trying to pull me out into the sunshine. I don't want to go there. And it was really like, I had to kind of lean on other people and find other sources, which is fine, because that's why we have more than one person in our life. Right. Yeah. And I didn't want to be resentful that he wasn't like a super emotional person. I knew he wasn't a super emotional person when I married him, and I think that opposites attract. And I think he's always been my rock, and iron sharpens iron and all that. So I think that his strength is something that attracted me to him, but he was not going to be this guy who just coddled me and said, there, take all the time you need. He was constantly like, you have to be bigger than this. You have to be bigger than this. Like, this is controlling you. It's eating our life. And it was good that I was with somebody like that, because it would have been really easy for me to get stuck. It would have been really easy for me to just wallow.
And I think that that's great to hear you say that. And yet at the same time, I'm sure that, in the weeds of it at times, it still had to be challenging, right? Because it's like it was great to hear you had this expectation, this understanding of who you marry going into it. There's good in that because it really is counterbalancing just how deep you are in it. But at the same time, I'm sure it's also, you would have loved at times for him to just, and I'm sure he wasn't just like cold as ice all the time, but I'm sure that there was times when you were like, no, I just want you to like actually cry with me,
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, there were lots of those times. And he was like, well, you know me, and I'm not going to do that. So what else would you like to do? I can make you a sandwich. You like sandwich? So he's like, I can support you in the ways that I am able to support you. But if you want somebody to cry with, like, that's just not who I am. So I have other people in my life, my sister-in-law, and there were people that I could lean on who were very accommodating in that regard. Because again, I did not want to build up a wall of resentment because you weren't this and you weren't this and you weren't this. It's like, well, clearly I wasn't what he expected either. He thought that I'd be a working woman, right? And now I was feeling defective on top of it all. So of course I'm getting super defensive about anything that he says. So I think he wasn't really trying to I think he was just trying to keep his distance and be like, you just work that out, which was fine, which was what I needed because I didn't want somebody kind of pushing me too much. And he just took a step back, which was great. And, but as we came back and I was like, okay, I'm ready to try again. I want to do this because I felt at this point I needed to conquer it. Right. I'm not somebody that's used to failure in the sense that I'm just going to stay down and be like, oh, well, that didn't work. We're done with that. I was like, nope, time to try again. Let's do this again. Yeah. And so, trying in 2005, 2006, we kind of took 2007 off to just travel and drink and pout because I felt like we just need to take breaks sometimes. In 2008, we came back and did three IUIs and they all failed. So we took 2009 off to just travel and drink and pout. And then in 2010, we came back and did three more IUIs. Two failed and one was successful. And I carried her to 15 weeks before my water broke. So we did another stillbirth on that. And again, in the midst of everybody else in our family having babies, right? Everybody is people at church, who aren't on Facebook. Because at this time I was really open with everything. Because I, again, didn't have the luxury of private grief. I didn't have first trimester miscarriages. Everybody knew. And I just embraced that. I was like, you know what? This is my soapbox. There are enough people who don't talk about it for whatever reason. Either they don't get to, or it makes people uncomfortable, or they're not quite sure how to talk about it. This can be my soapbox. And I was putting my pregnancy tests on Facebook as soon as they were ready. I mean, I was open with everything because my biggest fear was somebody not knowing and coming up to me and going, oh, how's your pregnancy going? And I didn't want to have to answer that question all the time. So I was putting everything on Facebook so that you know. So if you come up to me, you better be in the know what's happening before you ask any questions because I don't want to rehash it every time I see somebody. Then we took 2011 off and I came back in 2012 and they were like, yeah, we've pumped you full of a whole bunch of stuff. You just need to do IVF now. And so we did IVF in 2012 and we transferred one fresh and I carried her to 28 weeks before my water broke. And then she was born at 29. So it was good. She was 3 pounds and she was perfect.
Okay. So maybe my last question before we then step into now you're starting to feel at least some sense of joy in the fact that you get to see a baby live. Did you feel like you said that, you were putting yourself out there, you were carrying the torch. Did that ever become a burden in and of itself because you were so out there, you felt this responsibility to share your story that it was like, I don't know, you were carrying other people's burden in trying to share your own?
No, I felt like it was something that actually really empowered me. So, you know how women, when we want to vent about something, it's really I just want to talk and I don't really want you to suggest any solutions. I just want to talk. So this became my way to talk about it because, I'm married to somebody who doesn't really want to talk about it a whole lot. So
the world will talk to me if my husband won't, damn it.
That's right. It's just like LinkedIn now. I'm like trying to get all these followers and he's like, keep me off the grid. So we're just complete opposites and it's fine. So there were times I felt like it was really great that I had this platform and I had women that came to me I hadn't talked to in decades, the comedians, and they were like, you're talking about this and I just went through this and I don't know what to do. And my husband is awkward with it. And none of my friends want to talk to me about it because they're already pregnant. And it's weird. And I know you've been through it and I need to be talked to. So I'm just going to talk to you. And is it weird that we haven't talked in a decade? Because I just want to talk. And it was great that those things happened because it gave me a sense of feeling useful and a purpose and needed, and that I was making a difference and I was helping in some way, because you feel so helpless in this situation, right? You feel like you're doing all these things to try to make it happen, when ultimately it's not really your call when this happens at all. You just have the feeling like you need to be doing. So for me, that was the doing.
And then you finally get the joy of being able to deliver the baby, and this is your first child, son or daughter?
This girl, yep.
Okay, so this first daughter, and so you deliver, but you deliver premature, so you like get the joy, and at the same time, it's like, but no, here's another trial.
Yeah. She was born at 3 pounds. There was like 20 people in the delivery room because there were NICU nurses there, NICU doctors there, neonatologists there. There was like all my doctors that I needed. You know, we had just signed all the forms with the hospital about health expectations of a 29-week-old baby being born, lifelong complications that we should anticipate. And like the timing was good in that we had time to like do beta-methadone injections, so that helps the lung maturation, so that the infant's much more likely to be able to breathe on their own. And at that point, breathing is really your biggest focus. You just want lungs to be working, and you just want them to have enough oxygen. So there was 5 days between when my water broke and when my white count got so high that they were like, we just need to take her.
Wow. And so do you feel like that there was more joy in the fact that you had this child, or that you were still in the sense of like, God, what are you doing? Like, I've already been through horrible, horrible tragedy twice. Why don't I just have a healthy baby day one?
Yeah, no, I was ready for that. I was like, this is what you're going to give me. Okay, this is better than the last thing. Like, this I can do. Wow. And I felt really, again, because once you hold that child, everything changes, and all of a sudden, this is what we're fighting for, and this is where we are. And I finally felt like I had been given something. And so no matter how hard it was, I wasn't going to complain at that point. I had been angry at God for a long time. I had been pouting for a really long time. I had been temper tantrum my way through a decade for a really long time. So the fact that I had this, again, I wanted to be useful. I had plenty of time on bed rest to become a student of parenting. So I was a know-it-all. I knew all the things. And then she ended up being a really like chill baby. Like, she was easy to feed, easy to sleep, easy to discipline, like very calm, happy. And I was like, why do people talk about this parenting thing as hard? I'm super great at this. This is amazing. And so again, it was like, see, God, I should have done this all along. Like, cause I would get so mad when I'd go to Target and I can't reproduce, but I see all these people yelling at their kids, dragging them out by the ears. And like, oh, this is fabulous. And then it just turned you into a mean human. You know, you start judging other people. And it's like, and now having been a parent for a long time, I've had those days where I've been that mom in Target, you know, but you don't have that perspective at that point. You're just all judgy and bitter because you're salty and angry. So I was just happy that I had some joy and I wasn't a miserable person anymore, because I was not one of those people that was making lemonade out of lemons. Like, I did not handle it with poise and grace. I lost my ability to be happy for people. I was miserable. You did not want to be around me.
So Rachel, I hear a lot of like you being super honest with yourself, and obviously just with everybody that you talk to about the fact that, you know, you didn't handle this well, I guess is, like how to sum that up. Yes. At the same time though, because I think there's a lot of people because I think we go to two extremes, right? I think that, we swing to one side, which is maybe what you experienced, which was you were frustrated, you were angry, you were pouting, you were, like it was all like, it was so much negative, and rightfully so. The other side though is everything's okay. Don't worry about it. Especially like, we talk about and have referenced God in this, like, especially like as a Christian, a lot of times people are like, this is God's plan for my life. Everything's going to be okay. It's almost like emotionless, as though it's just, God works all things out for my good. And like, it's just going to work itself out. So there's people sitting on both sides of that. Like, do you feel like there is a happy medium? I don't know if happy is even the right word. Is there a middle somewhere as somebody listens, because whether it's enduring the frustrations, hurt, and agony of not being able to get pregnant or losing children, or it could be a completely different type of, hurt or tragedy. Like, do you feel like there's wisdom somewhere in the middle where people can wallow in their sadness and hurt and even be angry, and at the same time find peace and understanding in what's going on?
Yeah, I think it's really important to allow people to grieve and be angry. I think that we want them to feel better. So we're trying to hey, you want to go do that? We just want you to feel better. We just want you to smile. We just want you to do something. But people aren't ready for that. It's part of the process that you have to go through. I love that verse in Isaiah where it says, I refined you in the furnace of affliction. This is huge, and I can't become what I'm supposed to be unless I go through this. So stop rushing me through it and telling me to just shake it off. I have to be here. I have to be present. And for me, again, once Brinley was born, it really changed everything, because during that previous decade, I was so self-focused and so looking inward that you just end up spiraling downward. And there's once you have something else to put your attention towards, then all of a sudden the sun's out again. And I think for me, when I'm feeling invisible and broken and insignificant and all of these terrible things, the best way to fix that, in my opinion, was to do something for somebody else that made a difference. The more I focused on me, the more upset I was, and the more disappointed I became, and the more depressed I became about things. But the more I took that energy and focused it on other people, then I felt useful. Then I felt needed. I felt impactful. I felt like I was making a difference. And all of a sudden, days had meaning, right? Whether I got out of bed or not had significance to someone else. And as a mom, that's super important, right? Brinley was born in 2012. As soon as she was a year old, we went back for another Frosty, and I carried her to 31 weeks. And she was born at 31 weeks, and then she was fine. And then as soon as Annie turned a year old, we went back and got another Frosty. And then, that's when Lincoln was born. And that was crazy because we just don't make boys in this family. Of all of these pregnancies, they had all been girls. My husband has an identical twin that has 6 girls. I was I just don't think they make any white sperm. But he came along. If he was our first, he might have been our only. He has a different situation than the girls. And and then when he was a year old, we went back for the last Frosty because we had 4 embryos. And I was hey, so I had to buy a minivan, and I'm out of bedrooms. And you said this wasn't going to happen, because I was 3 for 3, which in my age group was amazing. Yeah.
Wow.
And I jinxed myself because the last one didn't take, but still just having that experience. And again, having my happily ever after, finally, after being angry at God for so long and telling him that his plan was wrong and telling him that my plan was better. If I had had that child, I wouldn't have these children now, and there's all these things you start thinking about. And ultimately, you just can't see behind the curtain all the time. All you can see is what's revealed to you. And it's really not up to you of when things are going to happen. And I thought about that. There's something in the first chapter of James. It's a man's anger does not bring the righteous life that God desires, something like that. And when I had sat with that for a long time, I was what am I doing being salty and angry all the time? What is this? What is this accomplishing? Right? I'm having a pity party and I'm mad at God and I'm just protesting. I'm under protest. That's my grievances have been aired. That's really acknowledged. But what am I trying to gain? And once I had all of those things, I just really was able to let it go and heal from that point on.
Yeah. Well, I think it's amazing too. I mean, even retracing back to when you were talking about before you had your first child, and you said that you were finding yourself so useful in being able to help other people through their story. And I think that's so amazing, because had those 2 really horrific experiences not happened to you, you wouldn't, you were vocal, you were open, you were sharing your journey. That's not everybody's story, and understandably, but God created you that way. And so in doing so, there was this sense of, there had to be, I will say, I guess, this sense of worth and value, because as a woman, and I understand this completely, so much, of how you see yourself is in your ability to have children and to be a mom. Yeah. And again, there's good and bad in that, but it was I'm not having children, so I'm not worth it. I'm not worthy. I'm not valuable. And all of a sudden, at least for a season, God kind of redirected that and was giving you so much worth and giving you so much value through all of these people that you were interacting with. And so I think that, thankfully, the story didn't end there, but even had the story ended there, it may have been harder for you to deal with. But man, just what a beautiful picture of God using you in a completely different way to demonstrate that worth and value he's put into you.
Yeah, I think also for me during that time, I needed a whole lot of affirmation and praise, and I needed a whole lot of pat on the backs and theirs. And so, yeah, like thrusting myself into my job in the insurance industry was really nice because they're good at that, right? Like there were 3 or 4 incentive trips a year that my husband and I were going to go on. And, Eric Silverman was my manager at the time. And there were days where I was just like, I don't feel like dealing with life today. And I just need you to do some things with that. And he always had my back on things.
Wow.
But I thrust myself into Aflac, and I was like the number 3 recruiter in the country. And wow. Eric was a really high recruiting region, as everybody knows. And so I was coachable and I just did whatever he told me to do. But that was what I needed. I needed all of those awards and the stupid trips and the stupid trophies and all of those things that my husband thinks is utterly ridiculous. Like I needed those things as validation that like I'm worthy and I was doing something good. And just because I couldn't do this doesn't mean that I can't do something really great. So there were lots of things in my life where I was just trying to find a way to keep going because I couldn't sit. I just didn't want to get stuck. I knew that would have been really bad.
Yeah. So I have a couple more questions, but I think one that comes to mind for me right now. So as you think right now about like how that has shaped your ability just to go live life, I mean, you would hope and pray that those were the 2 worst experiences of your life, that you will never experience a tragedy any greater. You pray that's the case. We don't know, but we're hopeful. But like having gone through that, like how has that shaped then how you just operate on the day to day now?
Yeah, I think that, and again, I think about this when I hear about struggles that people are having because no one is immune, right? Everybody is going to have challenges in life. We're all going to, like, life's not fair. We're all going to have failures. We're all going to have bad things happen. I used to kind of have those mentalities of like Job's friends, like where it was like, well, you must have done something to incur this. You must have done something to deserve this, right? Like if you do bad things come into your life. If you do good things come in your life. But of course, that's not how God works. And it just took a while for me to just understand that the processing of the situations is more important. Like Job never got a why. Right. And so often we're like in our like just angry and asking why. It doesn't matter. It's what you're going to do with it. It's what you're about. It's what your next step is that matters. The why doesn't really matter. It's who you become. It's what you do. It's the things that you're remembered for. It's how you rise above this that matters. It's not the thing. It's the thing after the thing.
Okay. So now here you are, I don't know, 20 years, right? 15 years removed from that. 20 years almost from the first one. And so what is the thing beyond the thing now?
So the thing beyond the thing now is like really just being the best that I can be in the things that I'm putting my life towards, right? So I'm super excited and passionate about this startup that I work for. I think anybody working for a startup or as an entrepreneur or for a nonprofit, it's all the same kind of like, you live and breathe by this. I wake up in the middle of the night and I'm like, oh, this would be a good post. We got to do this. And I'm starting to think about things like this.
Go back to bed.
I know. But it's really like what you live and breathe for. And it really matters. Like I really wanted to do something where it mattered if I was good, if I was contributing, if I showed up 100% fully, or if I was just dogging it. And this is something where it really matters and I really believe in it. So that's huge. With my kids, like during the pandemic, they really didn't dig all day computer school. So I decided to homeschool them for a while. And that was really important to me to just be able to have the freedom and flexibility to do that. And now we have them in like this great Christian school, which I love. And that's just been a huge priority for me because I just feel like they should learn how to write cursive and read an analog clock and carry the one and count money back, change back without a calculator, like just simple things that a lot of kids can't do anymore. I was like, feel like these are priorities.
Yeah.
And then I coach their sport. So that's been a huge thing for me, just being able to volunteer in the community. And I coach my girls' sports and my husband coaches my son's sport. And it's really nice for us to get to know their friends and the families in the community. So we have that flexibility and that like priority in our lives that like, we're going to do these things. We're going to be the family that coaches. We're going to be the family that goes to church. We're going to be the family that, does all the things. But there was a long time where I didn't think that we would have any of it. So it's really important that we give ourselves as much as we can and not waste the opportunities we've been given.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a huge part of, of the lesson. I think on the other side of anything awful is realizing that, life is so precious and we need to make the most of, the life that we have. So I think that that's incredible. So an interesting question, maybe, at least when I ask it, people cringe. But would you say that you are thankful for what you went through?
For sure. Yeah. Like it's really hard for me to say that now because I was really, really mad for a long time. And I swore out of my pride I was never going to say that. Right. Because that would be admitting defeat. That would be admitting that God was right. And I was convinced my path was better. And I still don't really, again, I didn't have to know why. I don't get to know why. I don't get to know why I have these 3 kids and not those 2 kids. I don't really know. But it's all part of God's plan. And I think it changed other people's lives along the way as I kind of did use this for my soapbox and they were able to reach out. And I was, a lifesaver in some capacity for people who really felt like they didn't have other people to talk to. Because a lot of women, like I understand it's a personal issue. A lot of women don't want to talk about it. But it makes people who go through it feel alone and isolated and like there's something wrong with me because why is this happening to me? They don't realize that it happens to everybody.
Yeah.
So I was happy to be on the soapbox about that because I felt like nobody else was, and I wasn't sure why. And my husband was like, it just makes people uncomfortable to talk about it. Stop talking about it. But I think some people want to talk about it. Like, you don't have to talk about it, but I'm going to talk about it because that's what I do. I'm in sales. I talk. And I just think there's no sense in covering it up. I thought that this was my life. This was the identity of my life. It was the struggle of my life for a decade. But every season of life brings new struggles. Like I bought my childhood house for my parents. And so they lived in the house still. So I'm solidly in the sandwich generation. And my dad just passed away in January of last year, but the months leading up to his death were really difficult because, he wanted to stay here in the house. And then my mom felt obligated to take care of him, but then she wasn't getting any sleep. So I'm trying to take care of her. And it's like having a newborn in the house again, where I hear the door click at 2:00 in the morning. And, he's wandering down the road in his pajamas because he's going to go over to the army base. So it's like so many things. And with her, just watching the disillusion of this man that she had spent her life with into becoming this completely different person. Like she had to just realize the man she had married was gone. And now she was left with this angry man child who doesn't know where his pajamas are and just wants to eat ice cream, And so it was really difficult to kind of, it's not like, oh, I've arrived in life and that mountain is hurdled and now it's smooth sailing. Like your whole life. If you think things are going well now, put your seatbelt on, man, because something's going to happen and just be ready for it. And don't cry yourself a river. Like it's inevitable. It's going to happen to all of us. Just be ready.
Yeah. God, so good. Okay. Because you brought it up so many times, I guess my final question is, do you feel like you could have done this apart from having faith in God?
No, I mean, like I said, I really did struggle with my faith during that dark decade. I really was angry at God. I really did everything I could to just make him mad. And that equals just a lot of self-destructive behavior that hurts a lot of other people too. So, that's a great plan. But when you come back to it, you just realize, I think it just makes us better parents, like all these things. The older you get, the smarter your parents become, right? That whole thing where you realize, oh, everybody has been through stuff. And everybody's life who seems like it's perfect isn't perfect because it is perfect. It's perfect just because they put some polish on it, but it's really underneath probably sticky and yucky the way the rest of us are. So people get good at hiding things and covering it up and making it look pretty. But everybody has some things happening. And sometimes the people who look even more perfect are doing that to overcompensate for a lot of other things happening. So you just never know what people's lives are. We live in this society where everything is just a facade society and everything is what we want you to believe it is. But that's why it's important, I think, with business and the LinkedIn stuff and like everything else. It's so important to know who you're working with and try to get to know people on a people basis. Like, who are you? Like, what are you all about? What makes you tick? Because you could work with anybody, right? Why do you want to work with me? Why do you want to work with Ryan? Why do you want to work with any of these people? What makes us different than anybody else? And I don't want to I'm going to like maybe put a filter on a picture here and there. Like, I'm going to have a facade, but at the same time, I really want to be authentic and what you're getting. Like, what you see is what you get. I think you can tell from my demeanor. Like, I'm just not going to sugarcoat stuff a whole lot. Yeah. And those are the kind of people that I like to work with because I know they're going to call it like it is.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I think that, that's how I believe we find the greatest amount of success in life. And that's not always monetary, but in many ways it leads that way. Is just when we align with other people similar to us that want to be themselves, that want to put themselves out there, that want to connect on that level, we just forge such deeper friendships. And when we are on that foundation, it allows us to help each other in a much greater way, in that professional capacity, in the personal capacity. And that's what we're all after, is just trying to build the best relationships we can to be as successful as we can, whether it's in business or life or anything else. So I see so much value in that.
Yeah. And I think it's just important to remind people that we're human. Like, we live in a kind of remote world, and there are a lot of people who don't you're not pokeable next to the person next to you anymore. And I think it's really important to just, I think that makes us the need for us to share a little bit more is even greater, to reveal a little bit more about who we are, because we're not just a face in the Brady box, like the Brady Bunch thing. I just think it's really important for us to let people in a little bit, because it's harder. I think we're less accessible physically now, so we have to be more accessible emotionally.
No, that's a good word to finish on. I mean, thank you for letting us in. I mean, I know, at this point, it's probably a lot easier, for you to talk about it as you've learned, as you've grown, but still, I mean, it causes you to have to continue to be vulnerable, to continue to act in such a way, regardless of whether it was talking about your past or talking about your future or present. And so I appreciate that in you, and I know other people will too. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for letting me share my story. You never know who's going to get encouragement from it. So I never want to stop telling it. Sometimes I need to hear it myself too, because I felt like I was such a dark person for a long time. This puts wind in my sails to just be the best I can be in every facet. Everything that I touch, I want to show up for and be the best that I can be. Because for a long time, I was just on the bench. I wasn't at the game.
Yeah. Well, then that's my challenge to everybody that's listening. So if you're listening to this episode or watching this episode on YouTube, and now you've heard Rachel share her story, so she would love some affirmation for what a great job she did. She didn't even ask for it. I'm just saying, just find her. We'll make sure to put links to all of her contact information in the show notes. LinkedIn, I know, is going to be one of those, and just shoot her a DM and just let her know. I think that it's important. Again, no matter how long you've been sharing this story, it's brave to be able to do that. It's encouraging to be able to do that. It's strengthening to be able to do that. And so, yeah. I'm challenging y'all to let her know. So Rachel, again, thank you so much. It's been great. And I know this won't be the last time we talk, but for now, this is the end of this conversation.
Thanks again. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. All right, guys. Well, that wraps up another episode of Authentic Conversations. As always, make sure you connect with Rachel, our guest. Let her know just how wonderful she is. If you have any questions, comments, concerns for me, you know where to find me. Thanks so much. Talk to you guys soon.
Thank you for joining me on this episode of Authentic Conversations. If you are ready to live the life you've dreamed of, I'm here to help. Head to ryanjamesmiller.com/podcast to begin your journey. And if this episode impacted you in any way, pay it forward by sharing it with someone you know. I'm Ryan James Miller, and I'll see you next time on Authentic Conversations.